last 2 weeks, we've looked at Psalm 19 and verse 7 as being a passage for our consideration, and especially it's good for young people, but all of us as we strive to gain wisdom from God, where we rely upon the Scriptures. And Psalm 19:7 says the testimony of Jehovah, as if he is an eyewitness to things that we might not know and that we could never see by ourselves. That the testimony of Jehovah is sure. What does it do? It makes wise, it gives wisdom, it gives practical knowledge to those without experience. That's what the simple are. We've talked about that. It's not a lack of intelligence, it's a lack of experience. A lot of times that's what we are in our youth. We haven't experienced the things of life. We're going to look at a grown-up passage. We're going to look at a grown-up subject today. But I thought it would be very important for young people as they start out in their life, before maybe they have a lot of difficulties in their life, to understand that God's testimony has spoken about his providence. No, his providence. No, his providence. You see those words there? We look at the word pro, and we look at video. We look at it, pro goes before video, and video is the idea of seeing. We have somebody that has looked down the corners of time, who happens to be timeless, and when we speak about God's providence, he sees it. You haven't experienced it yet, but he sees that. Is he just looking? Is he just watching? It's more than just, well, he just created everything and then he let it go and he's not interested. No, we'll see. He sees. Here's the second question. Is he willing to do anything about it? He's able to see down the road the things that are coming. Does he provide? That's also in the word providence. And we'll see, yes, God does. Because what he does, he sustains us. He is providing for us the things that we need. And when we look at God, with the idea of when he created the heavens and the earth, we noticed in Genesis 1, when we spoke about that testimony of Jehovah, nobody else was there other than God in the very beginning, is that the word created, bara, not only denotes that it's something that came into being, and it's something that God created, but because it came into being, and because he is in being, he's there, he sustains it. That's also found in that word, created. Take away the being of God, and we're not here. The earth's not here. The universe is not here. If we come to the point in our young life that God is, we need to understand that I'm still here, and because he has being, I have being. It's not a big, large next step. But if he sees and he looks and he doesn't act, then what good is providence? What good is seen before? And therefore we come to the argument of the atheist. Here is evil that's in our world. If he sees it and does nothing about it, he's not worthy to be called God. And it is here, how did it get here? And if he's not going to do anything about it, maybe he's malevolent. Maybe he's evil. How do you know he's a good God? Either he's not good or he's not God. And the atheists have their ways of looking at things. And providence does not ignore evil. And if God is sustaining us, why do I have to pray? Why does the Bible teach us that we have to pray if he already sees and you say he provides, why do I need to ask for it in prayer? Well, there's a lot of issues with providence. A lot of grown-up questions to be asked and answered. And we're going to go to God's Word, and we're going to deal with that problem of evil, and we're going to deal with this responsibility we have to prayer, and I hope we'll make some proper application in our life, because God sees, God cares, God provides. Let's notice that what he creates, he sustains. This is the testimony of God. It's not that he's just looking and seeing, he sustains it. In Acts the 17th chapter, verse 25, when Paul is preaching about the true God to people who were very religious and they were very superstitious, they worshiped them all, even the one that's unknown. So I'll tell you about God. There's only one, and you can know him. He says, seeing he himself, what does he do? He giveth to all life and breath, and then just let it go. He has nothing else to do with it. You're breathing now. You got it from me. I created things. I got you in motion. Now, the things you need, the sustenance, I'm not part of that. What's this all things business? Breath, life, sustenance. That's what Paul said about God. In verse 28, talk about his being and what we would be like without him just being. For in him we live. In him. Not apart from him. Not if he doesn't exist, I'm still here. In him we live and move and have our very being. If he's no longer being, we're no longer being. Because it's in him we have our being. In him we move. In him we live. You thought about that in connection with providence? The testimony of God is sure. He has being, therefore I have being, and in his being I'm moving. He has set the bounds of our habitation. I live. He gives us all things to enjoy, Timothy says. Paul said to Timothy. God is seeing, and he is indeed providing. He sustains what he has created. He sustains what he's created by his very being and great power. Well, I want to look at the Philistines for a moment. You ever thought about the Philistines and God's providence? And here's where we do not ignore evil. Evil at the hands of God. This kind of brings it into focus. And I want you to notice in 1 Samuel, the 6th chapter, a lot of things have happened before this, but the Philistines are at the point, we don't want the Ark of the Covenant around our towns. Ashdod, Gath, we got trouble everywhere. That Ark of the Covenant, we stole it from the Jews, and it's killed us, and it's brought forth tumors. We put it in the holy place that we have for our god Dagon, and Dagon just crumbled, fell over. We want to send him back. And the Philistines get together with their smart men and their priests and their diviners, and they're looking at secret things, and he says, we're going to send that ark back with 2 milk cows, and we'll talk about them in just a moment, 2 milk cows, and we're going to let them go. The Ark of the Covenant's going to be on that cart. And if it goeth by the way of its own border to Bethshemesh, then he hath done us this great evil. It means God has done that. But if not, then we shall know that it's not his hand that smote us. It was a chance that happened to us. God or chance? God seeing and acting and providing, or is it by chance? I think these people are religious, but they act like atheists. So, by the way, we're going to have a little edge on this whole thing because we really don't want it to be God. We're going to take 2 milk cows that just had young ones, and we're going to lock up the young ones, and we're also going to take 2 milk cows that have never been yoked. Now, how would that turn out, usually? Here's a mother cow just gave birth and feeding the young. You let them go, they're going back to where their young are. And if you've never yoked a cow, never been under the yoke, when they first get under a yoke, because they're going to be on a yoke and they're carrying this cart, they're going to be very fidgety. That's what the Philistines said, that's what we'll do. And if it goes the way, the border to Bathshemesh, we know he's done this evil. What evil? Tumors. Killed people. Destroyed our God, Dagon, and in his holy place. But they're hoping that it was just by chance. And not before a being that is going to act. But God always overcomes man's odds. And he went back. What's the answer? God did this evil. What do you think about it? I say, yes, he did. Men died. Men had tumors. It was unpleasant. And God brought something that was not pleasant to them. This is the evil he has done. God doesn't hide from evil. And what we fail to understand is that sometimes there's a consequence of action before a holy God. We'll drive this home before we're finished. And these were consequences that were taking place. But was it chance that day that those 2 milk cows with their young tied up somewhere else, never been under the yoke before, they just gently went to Bathshemesh? Or was God leading the way? It's God. Joseph, what's your touch with God's providence? Much in every way. And it's interesting that it's not when he is in the pit and crying for his brothers not to do what they did. It's not when he is being accused wrongfully of seducing Potiphar's wife and put in jail. It's not when he is ignored by the very ones he helped get out of jail. He had to stay in prison for some more time. No, he looks at providence down the road when we catch up to what God foresaw. And he realizes God has sustained. That's kind of when we look back and we see providence. So here's Joseph saying to his brothers, they're afraid, "Fear not, for am I in the place of God? I'm not omnipotent. Yes, you're asking for my forgiveness, but I'm not God to give that," because he wasn't going to hold that against them. That's something he could do, and he didn't. But he says in verse 20, "And as for you, ye meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring to pass as this day to save much people alive." God doesn't shy away from evil. How could God, be inherently good, have anything to do with evil? Because sometimes evil is of the second category. When God created man, he created everyone good. Everything was good. Very good. But man had a free will, and man acted upon that free will and went away from God, and evil takes place. And men have been doing Joseph evil. His own brethren did that. Why? Because they were jealous. Evil was in their heart, not because God put it there. But he's dealing with it. His providence deals with evil. It doesn't shy away from it. It's not a big, why? If you're not dealing, if you're so good, how come you can't handle evil? He's handling it. He's handling it. Man, brothers, you meant evil. God meant the same thing for good. Because he's able to see it this day. Now see, I've been in a place to use God's wisdom that he blessed me with, and we got plenty of provisions, not only for Egypt, but for my family. Now, the question is, does evil happen without God seeing it? God didn't see that coming. He can't bear to look at evil. He doesn't see it. It doesn't exist. Christian scientists believe it's an illusion. God doesn't. That's why they just didn't really exist. No, you meant evil against me. And that's the testimony of God, as Joseph speaks the truth. Does God see evil but is unable to overcome it? Here's a great example. He overcame it. And we fail to understand that. There are secondary causes of evil. When people say God has ordained everything that comes to pass, yes, both good and evil, what do you think they mean by ordaining? Well, I want it to come to pass? Not necessarily. It doesn't mean that. But nothing happens without God seeing it. And he sees it beforehand. But what we realize that evil cannot be attributed to God. Sometimes it's what we do. As where heart goes in the way of evil, jealousy leads to selling him and lying to daddy about his true existence. All that is evil that comes from man, but we're still dealing with the Philistines, and God did that directly. But both in this promise, he's able to overcome that. He's able to teach us things from that. Thirdly, does God's providence happen without personal pain? Here's the way we look at it. God, you provide for me, and I don't want any pain in life. And if I have any pain, you must not exist. No, I know you exist. I know you see, but you're not doing anything about it. Is that right? Just because you're going through some pain? Persecution, and injustice. Notice how Joseph looked at God's providence. God, you meant it for good. What was the good? To save much people alive. It's not about me, God. You used me. You put me in the place where you could work out your good. I'm okay with that. Are you? Or do we think God is not doing anything if I have pain in my heart? If I'm going through difficult times? Young people, you may experience that. But God's testimony in your heart makes you wise. Before you experience that, when you do, you won't shake your fist at God. Say, God, I'm going to hold on. If you're using me, I hope I can be an instrument. I'll hold on with you. But I know good sometimes comes for the many. Sometimes it's at the individual's pain. Joseph is a good example of that. I think we can learn something from that. What about prayer? New Testament. What about God and me and life's necessities? There's the question. There's the concept. What about God? He sees it. What about me? Experience it and my needs, my sustenance. What do we know from your testimony, O God? Well, Matthew 6:32 says, "For your heavenly Father knoweth ye have need of these things." Wonderful. That's good. God exists and knows of my need. Now, is he going to do something about it? What's going to happen next? Well, if he sees and knows, we come back to the question we introduced, why must I pray for these things? You say, well, why do we need to pray? Well, Jesus teaches us to do that. In Matthew the 6th chapter and verse 11, people were seeing how others prayed, how the Pharisees, they prayed, and it wasn't right. Their ostentatious spirit was involved instead of really trusting in God to provide for them. But it says, verse 9, "Pray ye our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." Every prayer should have adoration for God in it. That's how he started it. "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done as in heaven as on earth. Give us this day our daily bread." He's asking for it. Praying for my daily sustenance. God, did you not see down the future? Maybe see about, yesterday saw the day that I needed it. Why do I have to pray for it today? That's a good question. Why do I need to do that? But he said, pray for your daily bread every day. Why must I pray for these things if, God, you already know what I need? Why do I need to do that? I believe it's for my benefit, not God's. You're not telling God something he doesn't know. But it teaches us that we go to him in prayer because we trust that he has the power to sustain us. And not only we trust, that trust comes by word of God. Again, the sure testimony of God that he does that. And that's what we see in Matthew 6 and verse 11. That's what we're noticing in that chapter. Do we trust God for our sustenance? Let me quickly take you through the thought process that God wants us to have, that the Lord wanted his people to have. And I want you to get it in your minds. How does he take us to where we need to be? When he says, don't be anxious for your life, what you eat or what you drink, or for your body, what you shall put on, is not the life more than the food and the body than the raiment? Good question. We're worried about what am I going to clothe myself to be warm? What am I going to feed where am I going to get the food to feed my body? He says, isn't your body and your life worth more than the clothes and the food? Why are you worried about that? The birds of the heaven, they don't plant and sow and gather in the barns, but the Father takes care of them. Are you not more valuable than the birds? All of a sudden we put ourselves, I'm created in the image of God. And yes, I'm talking about things when he's looking at my life and the body that I have. I'm more valuable than the birds. He feeds them. I think he sustains me. And you look like the fields and the grass and the flowers and the beauty of it all. You know what? It's going to be thrown in the fire. Aren't you more valuable than that? But look how they're arrayed. Solomon's glories can't compare to it. And by the way, where has anxiety ever got you anyway? How is anxiety causing you to be distracted from what you need to be doing? Where does it get you? Not in a place that's good. So all of those thought processes, he says, "O ye of little faith." And then he makes a point that I don't know I've always seen. It's there. You don't need to wonder about God. He knows what you have need of. What is that in the context of? Verse 32, "For after all these things do the Gentiles seek food, clothing, sustenance." The Gentiles are seeking that. That's when he says, "Your Father knoweth that you have need of these things." So what do? I'm not going to be anxious and I'm going to set myself, I'm going to get the food and get this and all the inside. No, I'm going to have faith in God. He knows, he sustains. I'm going to pray to God because it establishes my faith in him and my confidence. I can ask of him, and I have got other things to seek. You ever notice that? The Gentiles are seeking the very things that your body and your life are more important than. They're seeking these things and probably with anxiety. What am I supposed to seek? Seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. That hit me hard. I said, well, I just take, you seek, get your priorities straight. Yeah. What are you seeking? The Gentiles don't have this faith in God. They can, but they don't. And they're seeking. What their eyes are upon are the sustenance and how to get that and all that sort of thing. Anxiety is crippling, but they don't understand it. I'll just be anxious about it. I'm going to get it, gotta get it. No, you're not seeking that at all. Oh, you'll work for it and all this, but you're seeking God and his righteousness. You put him first, knowing that he will deliver all these things. Prayer was for my benefit. And I trust you, God, to sustain me of what you see I have need of. And I'm a little different than the world who says, well, God will give the rain to the just and the unjust. I'll get it soon enough. I said, God, you will deliver to your people. I have something else to seek. Your rule, your righteousness. Because I have confidence by faith that you'll sustain me. That's what Jesus is teaching us. He will provide. He has provided it already. And he will provide it when you need it. We just got to hold on to him in faith. Now, those are responses. I'm going to close with looking at 3 points of application as well. What these examples of the Philistines and Joseph and Jesus' teaching on prayer. It teaches what Peter tells us in 1 Peter 1:16. As children of obedience, we're to be holy. But he says, be holy, for I am holy. God's being. He's there. But he's there with a character that we need to remember, young and old, that he is a holy God. And therefore, in my life, in all manner of living, Peter says, I need to be holy because my God who has been is holy. I have been because of him. I will be holy. Now that is something that needs to be applied in our lives. Let's go back to our problem of evil. With the Philistines, God is teaching them, I brought the tumors on you. Now we know through Job, God allowed Satan to do the things he did. Don't know if that's the intermediary there, but not in the scripture, it's not there. God brought it on them. But think about this whole time of the Ark of the Covenant, why was it stolen from the Israelites? Here was the testimony of God there, the presence of God and his guidance, his sustenance, the manna, God's deliverance, the rod of Aaron that blossomed, God's teaching that I'm here and I'm leading, I'm guiding, I'm sustaining. How'd that get out of the hands of the Philistines to begin with? Or of the Israelites to begin with? You go back to the 4th chapter, you go back to the 3rd chapter, and Eli had 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas. And they followed their father's footsteps. They entered the priesthood. But they did not follow their father's footsteps. They were ungodly men. They did horrible things in the temple. Prostitution, disregarding the sacrifices that they were to partake of, that others were. And because Eli did not discipline them, he's going to take the Ark of the Covenant away from his hands. Why? Because God is a holy God. And there was some more things that took place. Because of what his sons did, they would die at the hands of the Philistines. In the 4th chapter, Eli is 98 years old. Can an old man have some peace? And he gets word that Hophni and Phinehas are dead. By the way, the Ark of the Covenant has been taken. Eli was old and heavy. And when he got the news and it topped it off with the Ark of the Covenant, he fell over and broke his neck. And his daughter-in-law gets the word. She gives birth. She's not happy. Ichabod is his name. The glory has left Israel. God, did you bring all those events to a pass? Did you see that before it happened? Yes. He's not backing off. Why? Because he's holy. Dagon, why are you dropped off in pieces? Because I'm a holy God and there'll be no other God before me. And you Philistines, you have the Ark of the Covenant, but you're not a holy people. And I brought these tubers on you. How do you know that? I met your standard. The 2 milk cow that should be going back home to their children. And they had never been under a yoke. Watch them as they go to Beth-shemesh. It's not by chance. It's God. Joseph, why didn't you go ahead and have that affair with Potiphar's wife? Nobody's there. I mean, look where it got you. You fled fornication. You said, I cannot do this sin before God. And you left your garment there. That's not a man. But you fled. Look where it got you. Jail time. And not just for a short time. And who's your buddy in prison, after all? They can help you out? Joseph lived a life of holiness. Who wins in the end? Because being of God is not just being and all of his power, and he is eternal, but he's eternally holy. And all of a sudden you get to be unholy as you're experiencing the pain, Joseph, of the providence of God? Now, Joseph, he remained holy. And that's the great lesson, young people, for God's providence. As you go through life and you may one day look back at the events that happened, never look at that as, well, this happened because I became unholy. I gave in to this fleshly lust. I did this or that. No, you remain holy. Because the God who sustained you is a holy God. And you'll never have to be sorry for fleeing fornication. Secondly, let faith take the place of anxiety. While Joseph is in Egypt and going through the difficulties he went through, in Genesis 41 and verse 16, we'll notice that he never forgets God. He's never going to downplay God because of his predicament. Joseph answered Pharaoh, said, "It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace." He explains to him of his two dreams, talking about the famine that was to come and the 7 good years that he was going to provide, setting the stage for Joseph to one day look down the road and say, "Hey, I was here to sustain life." And when Jesus says, "O ye of little faith," don't be anxious. It's the antidote of anxiety. That's what faith is. We need to live that way. What good does anxiety do for you? It make you sick. It can make you so nervous. And it can destroy the fact that God is providing. You don't see it. He sees what you need. He'll take care of you. And we need to, in times of anxiety, put our trust in God. That's what God's providence teaches us. And thirdly, while we're going through the pain, let us be careful to never overlook the blessings. In Genesis, the 41st chapter, remember, he still has faith in God. In verses 50 through 52, Joseph was born 2 sons before the year of famine came, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For he said, God hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. He didn't forget his brothers. They didn't cease to exist because he blotted it out. It's in spite of being separated from them. It is in spite from my toil. It's not that painful because he's blessed me with this child. He still has his trust in God and he sees this as a blessing. He didn't name them Ichabod. He names that firstborn. He's made me forget that. God is giving blessings even though he's still in Egypt. He's been put in a place of prestige. But we're not to chapter 50 yet, are we? And the name of the second one he called Ephraim, for God hath made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. He still experienced an affliction. He still departed from his brethren he's been away from. He's 30 years old. He may have been gone into Egypt when he's 16. He's been there for a number of years. But he doesn't ignore the blessings at the time of affliction. That's what we've got to train ourselves to do. Because we know at the end, whatever men may determine as being evil, God sees it, he works with it. It will be for good. I will remain holy. I'll remain faithful. I'll remain thankful as I go through the sadness that leads to good. Now those are things for grown-ups, but especially for young people. Providence of God is out. We got people that deny it. God can't do a miracle. He doesn't do anything. It's not true. He led 2 milk cows to teach the Philistines, I'm holy. I'm behind all this. He helped Joseph see at the end, yeah, it was painful for me, but God wanted to save much people alive. That was the good he saw that day. It didn't avoid the personal evil he went through. It overcomes it. And we can learn. I'm not going to be anxious. I can be careful. I can provide for what I think's coming. We do that a lot. Mothers and dads do that. When you have children, why do you take all that equipment, diaper bags and everything that could ever happen? You've experienced it and you want to be prepared. We do a little of that provision stuff because we see down the road of what can happen and we want to provide for it. God does that with the whole world. And when we come to the end of our life, I hope we will remain holy, full of faith, and a long life's journey. I don't care how hard it gets. Look at the blessings that you have before you. Count your many blessings, even when you're in the land of affliction. And I think we'll be learning from the providence of God. And we'll be living as we should. This morning, if you're outside of Jesus Christ, we encourage you to become a Christian. We sang before we got here, Christ for the world we sing. He's the only answer for the world. Because we stand before a holy God, we stand before a sovereign God, and we'll stand before the judgment seat of Christ to give an answer of what we've done in the body, whether it be good or bad. Every one of us will do that. Why not stand before him as a justified Christian? And why don't you become a Christian now by obeying the gospel as we stand and sing? Please come.